The real point of web analytics is not just to collect data, it's to get insights. And through a relatively new feature called Intelligence, Google Analytics is going to help make analysis of our site easier and help us draw accurate conclusions faster. To get to Intelligence, we navigate by clicking on the first tab here called Intelligence. And one of the ways we can use this is to explain what we're seeing in the data, but we can't initially explain otherwise. For example, we see the standard weekday versus weekend pattern here in our data until we get here to the end of the month, until we see a large spike here, which looks a little bit unusual and is something we can't initially explain. With the automatic intelligence feature, Google's constantly scouring your account looking for this type of unusual activity. In fact, they can usually detect things we may never otherwise see because we're looking at just one single metric here, visits, while Google's looking at all of our different metrics and dimensions trying to find unusual activity across our account. In this case, it looks like Google's found 13 alerts on that particular day. If we click this green bar, we'll be able to see what those 13 alerts are listed down below. So in this case, looking at total traffic, we have 420 visits, that's up 83%, 386 visitors, that's up 81%, page views are up 49%, our bounce rate is up 16%, not a good thing, so here in red. Our new visitors are up 82% in terms of visits and 48% in page views. Visitors from California are up 67%, returning visitors are up 71%, and the US as a whole is up 42%. But the real interesting data comes down here when we look at our traffic sources. In other words, what traffic sources are causing these rises? Well, if we look at our source of Twitter, it's up over 500%. Our social media is up over 500%. The campaign targeting our blog is up over 500%. This is likely to be a large contributor because this has such an impact here. And what we see over here is that this correlates to this significance bar. Significance is an important metric when it comes to alerts because when we talk about unusual traffic, it's not just the absolute number that matters. In other words, we don't want to focus on whether we got 50 more visitors from New York today. We want to know how far that was from what's usual. In other words, what we expected it to be. You can think of significance as the same concept as measuring the number of standard deviations from that expected value. An event's significance is determined by comparing the present performance of a given metric with the expected performance of it, which is written here in gray near the metric. Analytics Intelligence is able to calculate the expected performance by taking past performance information into account. If the present and actual performance differs from the expected performance, then Google Analytics will assign a significance rating to it. A higher significance rating is assigned as the difference between the actual performance increases with the expected performance. We can vary this by moving this slider. The sensitivity slider is going to show which of these get shown. In other words, how many alerts do I want to trigger and how sensitive do I want it to be? When I move the slider to the left to indicate a lower sensitivity, this means fewer automatic alerts will be triggered to appear in this intelligence reports page. The further left the slider is moved, the higher the significance the triggered alerts has to be. When the slider is moved back to the right, the sensitivity is higher, which means more alerts will be triggered. The higher the sensitivity, the lower the significance of the alerts. In other words, if you only want to see very unusual things, I set the sensitivity lower, and only things with a very high significance will appear in my account, and I will only receive green bars here when something very unusual happens, such as it did on this day. It's common to use intelligence in this forensic mode to explain things we otherwise couldn't, but we can also use it to discover insights that are otherwise buried and maybe not obvious enough for us to see. For example, if I set my sensitivity higher, I can see all kinds of alerts here triggered on days that weren't particularly unusual to me. For example, I see a lot of them here on this day, which looks to be very average at first sight. If I click on this green bar, I see 18 alerts triggered on that day, the most of any other in the month. As I scroll down here, I see high significance on here, my Goal 7 conversion rate. Now I know that Goal 7 is my conversion testing tool. As I scroll down, I can also see here again, under the medium of organic, that my Goal 7 conversion rate is up again, and under source of Google. What I can do to make this a little bit easier is switch this to a metric grouping. When I click on metrics and I scroll down, I can see that my Goal 7 conversion rate metrics are all grouped here together. And so I can quickly see that the medium of organic is up over 500%, the source of Google is up over 500%, and returning visitor. In other words, people who are already familiar with my site did a Google organic search to find my conversion testing tool. Although the use of this particular tool was up significantly here, over 500%, it may not have affected the visits of my site overall. Because I'm looking at the overall aggregate here, the overall number of visits to my site wasn't hugely affected, and therefore I could have easily missed this little bit of insight because I was only looking at the aggregate visits. Automatic intelligence helped me to figure out when something unusual is happening, even if it didn't necessarily jump out as obvious. Intelligence could be used in many ways, such as to find insights that were buried beyond view, or as we saw in the first forensic example, to explain something that we saw but couldn't easily explain. The best way to find what type of intelligence Google has dug up on your account is simply to open the report and start digging.